Hello and welcome to Badger Castle Creations. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made this piece of industrial sci-fi terrain, so I hope you enjoy. The basis for this structure was this large block of polystyrene that already resembled the shape of a building. I started by hunting for some Greeblies. I found some large, suitable pieces, and starting with this selection, I began attaching pieces to the polystyrene block. I started by filling any gaps in the block with appropriately sized Greeblies. I started with these two halves of a glue stick that I'd previously cut in half. I thought they'd look like a fan and a drain. I added this square plastic lid to one of the flat sides. Normal procedure going forward would be to use the pieces to create an indent in the block and then glue them into place with hot glue. I added this lid from a packaging tube and these panels from a toy car kit. I added this large grid piece from a game that I thought could function as a door. Most of these pieces are either from charity shops or from recycling. I added this large vent piece to fill another gap. I added these two fans. These are lids from yogurt pouches. This big floor piece is from another toy car. I wanted a large piece for the roof. I eventually found this toy tambourine. After removing the small pieces, I thought it would work as a quite convincing landing pad. I used this top of a salt grinder as another industrial fan. I cut a slightly larger gap to allow it to fit in. This was a lid from some kind of seasoning that I thought could work as an industrial hatch. I added this large tube curving around from one side to another. These are sensory stretch toys. They were a little difficult to keep in place. I used some cable ties to secure the one half, and then later finished it with another half of a smaller piece and a generous helping of hot glue. I added these hinge-looking pieces on both sides. I am honestly not sure entirely what they are. Got them from a DIY section. I added this small lid from a Tabasco bottle and sanded off the logo. I added quite a few of these wooden circles all over the piece. I then added some of these car fuses. I then started adding some panels using strips of craft foam. I glued in place this small set of toy stairs. I covered the bottom of the piece with craft foam to tidy it up a bit. I added some more foam panels. Then for some smaller detail, I started with some of these little wooden squares. I filled in some of the smaller gaps in the back with these pen lids. At this point, I gave the whole thing a pass with a universal filler to try and cover the polystyrene texture. I followed this with a light sand and cleaned up any rough bits. I then decided to add wires to the piece. And I mean lots of wires. I used a mixture of garden wire, thin crafting wire, and paper clips. I used the ends of the paper clips as cable ties. I tried to have some in bundles and also have some tangled together. For the small wires, they didn't really require gluing. They could just be jammed straight into the piece and stayed in place pretty well. For the thicker wire, I simply made holes with a screwdriver, put some hot glue on the ends, and then stuck them in place. I'll be completely honest, I did go a little overboard with the wires, because I decided to use them to cover up any polystyrene texture that was left over, because I couldn't be bothered to do another filler pass. With all that done, I gave the piece a quick sand, and then it was on to painting. The painting process was a little chaotic and a lot of back and forth to get the intended effect that I wanted, so not all of these steps are really necessary, but you can probably see what each of them achieve and use the ones that you feel are best. I started by basing the whole piece in an army green. I then mixed together a texture paste using green-brown paint, PVA glue, and sand, and went all over the piece with that to give it some texture and grit. I then did a sponging of a metal color, followed by a sponging of rust, then a light brown and a dark brown. I then mixed together a black wash using black ink and water. Then, to get some differentiation, I painted most of the cables in black. I also dry brushed black over the piece to add another layer of weathering. I then mixed together a brown wash using paint and water and covered the whole piece with that. I then mixed together another lot of texture paste for another pass. I then came back in with a metal dry brush to bring back some highlights, and then a dry brush of the original green color once again to bring back some of that color. I then repainted the cables black again because they'd lost a lot of their color. I dry brushed a rust color all over, and then another final pass of texture paste that I think really helped bring the whole piece together. And with that, the build was complete. I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out. Tried some new techniques that I've never done before. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.